This is Michael Woodward, and this is episode 86 of the Jumblethink podcast.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Jumblethink podcast, a podcast focused on telling the stories of dreamers, makers, innovators, and influencers. Along the way, we give you some tips and ideas of how you can chase your own big idea and dream and create the world you want to live in. Our guest on today's episode is Dave Cornell. More about Dave in a moment. Our guest on Monday's episode is Glenn Livingston. Glenn is a psychologist and the longtime CEO of a multi-million-dollar consulting firm. He's written a book called Never Binge Again about his journey overcoming obesity and his food prison. Now he's on a journey to help others overcome those obstacles too. He's been featured in the Chicago Sun-Times, UPN, the Star Ledger, Daily News, the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, CBS Radio, and WGN America. Make sure to check out Monday's episode with Glenn Livingston. Are you a dreamer, maker, innovator, or influencer, and you just haven't figured out how to make that big idea or dream a reality? We want to help you overcome the obstacles and reach that big idea and dream. So to help you in that process, we're launching our first ever virtual idea camps, and we want you to be a part of it. Swing on over to jumblethink.com/ideacamp, and you can fill out an easy form that just gives you some information as we get closer to the launch date. For everyone that signs up today, we are doing something really cool. We're giving away free entry into the first idea camp and access into our private Facebook group specifically for the Jumblethink community. So make sure you swing over today to jumblethink.com/ideacamp and sign up for some information about our upcoming virtual idea camp in 2018. Now let's jump into today's episode with Dave Cornell. Today's show is brought to you by FreshBooks.com. Get a free trial at gofreshbooks.com/jumblethink. That's gofreshbooks.com/jumblethink. I am super excited about today's guest. His name's Dave Cornell. His story is truly inspirational. I know I got a lot out of what he shared about overcoming the obstacles of losing his job at 54 and reinventing himself after spending 30 years working in the corporate world. He talks a lot about fear versus courage, overcoming fear, and just the realities of going deep into really becoming who you're supposed to be. You can learn more about Dave at cultivatecourage.com. Now let's join the conversation I had with Dave Cornell. Dave, I am so excited to have you on the podcast. Thanks for taking time out.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be with you and have become a fan in listening to your podcasts and preparing for today.
Oh, thanks so much. I was really enjoying getting to learn more about you before I got on the interview today. We chatted a little bit, but even in our research, looking at your website, reading articles that you've written, watching videos that people have recorded of you talking at various things, and it was just really, really fun. One of the things that stood out to me was you have this vast experience in corporate America, but a couple years ago, you had a pretty dramatic shift in that journey. I think you were 54 at the time when the recession hit, and all of a sudden you had to pivot. So tell us a little bit about your life before that pivot and kind of your process of deciding to go on a new adventure and a new journey as you went through that.
Yeah, back in 2010, January of 2010, I lost my job. Prior to that, I had been working in the corporate world. I was my background is sales management, and training and development. And interestingly enough, while I enjoyed what I did in the corporate world, I always felt like I should be doing something else.
Okay.
And in losing my job, and it was a pretty dramatic experience. As I said, January of 2010, I lost my job at a time when we lived in Minneapolis, St. Paul at the time. The economy in Minneapolis, as it was in many places across the country, was horrible.
Yeah.
I thought that I was a fairly capable guy and would find a new position in a month or two. I didn't realize how bad it was till I got out there. I was attending some different job networking groups with a variety of different people, many who were far more qualified and far more capable than I was. And they'd been out of work for, 3 months, 6 months, a year and longer.
Wow.
And I recognized very soon that this is going to be a more difficult process than I anticipated. Fast forward 13 months to February of 2012, my wife loses her job. She had worked in a church most of our married life in a variety of different roles. So there was downsizing in the church because giving was way down, and my wife was the first one to go. So we went through all of our savings over the course of that, year to 18 months. We ended up having to sell our home. We had maybe enough money, I think, for one more house payment. So it was a dramatic change in our life. And I recognized that if I wasn't going to find work, I needed to create work. Wow. So I just went back and looked at the things that I had done successfully and the things that I had enjoyed in my corporate life. And for me, speaking is something that I've always enjoyed. I've always gotten great comments on my ability to be up front. But I think one of the things that I've always done, too, is I've discounted that because it's something that came easy for me. I just assumed that it was that way for everybody else. So I started to develop a business around training and then also in attending these job networking groups, I started to have some conversations with people where they started talking about their fears.
Okay.
I also was going through some pretty intensive counseling at the time because I was diagnosed with situational depression.
Wow.
At the time, and it was a hard time. As a man, I felt like a failure, and so I discovered some things in my own life, some fears in my own life that I hadn't dealt with. And through the counseling, I began to deal with them. My father passed away very suddenly when I was 14. So much of it revolved around that.
Wow.
And not having dealt with that. And so then recognizing the fears in my own life and the need to then have courage to go through the counseling process and deal with that stuff that I hadn't dealt with for 50 years. Or 40 years. And so it was an incredibly difficult time, but it was one of the best things that ever happened to me because it forced me to deal with some things that I didn't want to. And it also got me into something that I'd always wanted to do, but didn't think that I was good enough.
Well, okay. So first off, I can completely relate to you about the recession. I lost my job actually working at a church for the same reason. The funds weren't there. And so I understand that process of fear and discovery in that process.
Yeah.
You talk about how you always in the back of your mind for all those years of working in the corporate sphere and sales, you were going, I'd always like to be a speaker. It was that little recurring thing that you were like, this would be so fun to do. And why didn't you pursue that earlier in your career? Why didn't you step into that?
I think a lot of it was fear related.
Okay.
And a lot of it was the voice. We talk a lot about the voice that we have in our head.
Yeah.
I saw when I would go see people speak, and again, being in the corporate world, the companies that I worked with would bring in these high powered, big name speakers, and they had books and they had dramatic stories of, surviving an airline hijacking or surviving cancer or whatever it might be. And I just thought, wow, those people have amazing stories.
Yeah.
I'm just a guy. I don't have a story like that. So,
yeah.
Why would anybody want to hear what I have to say?
So in that process, you go from the sustainable, the known to the unknown in this season. And you mentioned the counseling that you went through and the things that you worked through. How did you find your voice? How did you find the things that make you passionate, the things that when you just get up and you start sharing, when you're coaching, when you're speaking, What was the trigger or how did you identify, I guess is a better way to say it, that voice of your voice and the message that you have to bring?
It's an interesting thing. I think had I not gone through losing my job and us losing our home, I don't think I would have discovered that voice. So one of the things that I say when I speak is never underestimate the value of a crisis.
Yeah.
And so it was in that crisis time that I discovered my message about fear and courage.
Okay.
And it was in visiting with people who were in similar situations who would talk often about their fears. I'm afraid of creating my resume because I have no idea, what to put on it. I don't think that I have much in my background. I'm afraid to apply for this position because, I only meet 6 of the 10 criteria. And this word or form of the word fear, afraid, was everywhere. And it was in my mind. And so it was through that process, and again, through the counseling, and recognizing my own fears is where I think I really discovered that voice.
You mentioned before you lost your job, you kind of were settling for the status quo, the everyday, the norm. And so often I see fear and safety go hand in hand, settling for the safe option because of the fear. Was that the case for you?
Yeah, I think without question that was the case for me. It was safe. It was comfortable. It was, I'll say, easy.
Okay.
And part of it, again, goes back to the loss of my dad. When I was in school, got called out of school to come down to the office, and was told that my dad had passed away.
Oh my
The
goodness.
gentleman who had come to get me and my brother, and then we walked across the street to the elementary school, said to the 3 of us, my dad was a pastor, and so my mom had been a stay-at-home mom, and the gentleman who had come to pick us up said, "Now, boys, this is going to be hard. I don't want you to ask any questions. I don't want you to cry. I just want you to be men."
Wow.
And so I took that to heart. I didn't ask questions. I didn't cry. I just buried everything.
Wow.
And so that was the process of burying the things that I thought that I might want, or it became as you said, the word you said, a settling, because it was easy and I didn't have to deal with things that were uncomfortable for me.
So often I think people are discontent in their safety.
Mm-hmm.
And was that true for you? Were you discontent while you were living the safe life prior to this transition?
Oh, there's no question about that, Michael. I just had this internal anxiety that I never was doing what I should be doing.
Wow.
And so, yeah, you're hitting the nail right on the head. There was a great discontent. Yeah.
And I think so many people settle for, the 9-to-5, the safety net, the insurance, and it just seems like we're living in a time in history where that's being removed from so many people's lives. What would be maybe a recommendation that you would give someone who is empathizing with what you're saying? They're like, I feel stuck. I feel like I'm not satisfied. I feel like I'm not fulfilled. I feel like I'm not living up to my potential. What would be some things that you'd recommend that from your process, from your experience, from your journey, that they could maybe take and apply to theirs?
I think it's interesting to go back to your podcast on the 10 things.
Yeah.
And you talked about writing it down.
Okay.
And I think I think that there is great power if there's something that you want to do, write it down. And you may not even have it fully processed yet, but I think starting to get it down on paper and in words and out of your head will help you to get closer and closer the more you write to where you can find what it is that you really want. So I think that's the first step, is to get it out on paper, and then I think to verbalize it as well to somebody. So often we just hold this in. We think, oh, I could never do that. That's That's what other people do. That's what creative people do. I'm not that. And so we just hold it in. So I say the first step, I think, is to just get it out, put it on paper, tell somebody you trust, and then start to just explore it.
Well, it sounds like one of the things you're saying, an underlying current that I'm hearing, is that you find fulfillment and purpose. You find fulfillment in tapping into what you're created to do and really stepping into that instead of just living life every day without purpose.
Yeah. And here's the key. When there's several opportunities. If you go online and you Google living fearlessly or fearless living, you'll find, I think it's over 6 million different things you can look up around that. Courage is not about becoming fearless. Courage is about stepping into our fear. One of my favorite quotes about courage is from John Wayne. He says, "Courage is being scared to death, but saddling up anyway." And so it's about, you don't know what's going to happen, but just being willing to step into your fear, not knowing what the result is going to be, but recognizing that even if that step is the wrong step, at least you've done something. You've taken action rather than just sitting back in your fear and in your settlement.
I think so often we look at courageous people, maybe the firefighter, maybe the police officer, maybe the person who's living the life that we wish we could live. Maybe they're doing something that we're passionate about. And we just don't think that it's possible for us. And I think that often we look at courage as a characteristic that is for the few. What are some steps to transition from a life of fear into a life of courage?
Well, this is really fascinating. I have 3 steps to when I speak, and the first is to name your fear.
Okay.
I say it's much like being an alcoholic or a drug addict. If you're not willing to admit that you have that issue, you're never going to face it.
Okay.
You're going to just leave it buried and not do anything about it. Secondly, and this was the epiphany moment for me in my journey, Michael.
Okay.
Was seeing fear differently, and for me it was the recognition, because the fears that we're talking about today are irrational fears.
Yeah.
If our building is on fire and we happen to be in it, it's rational to get up and leave.
Yeah.
But if we're thinking to ourselves, I'm not good enough, I'm not old enough, I'm too old, I'm not smart enough, I'm too big, I'm too small, I'm whatever, that stuff's all irrational.
Yeah.
And for me, I used to think that my ability to speak and communicate was not that big a deal. It was only in counseling that I came to recognize that my ability to speak and communicate and tell stories in a way that makes a difference in people's lives is one of the gifts that God has bestowed upon me. And Michael, you know this, the gifts that we have are not for us,
right,
but for the people that we encounter in our lives every day.
Yeah.
So the recognition that fear is selfish was an epiphany moment for me.
Yeah.
If I've been given these gifts and I'm not utilizing them because I'm afraid, and God has given me a message to share with other people, and I'm not doing it because of my fear, that's all about me, and that's selfish. So I'm not doing what God has called me to do. I'm not communicating a message that God has given me that can make a difference for the people who hear it. It's all about me when we stay in our fear. And that for me was the big deal, was that fear is selfish.
I think that's a really, really powerful statement right there. I've never really thought of it that way, that not stepping into our talents is actually a selfish act. And I think it's a really powerful thought and process to really marinate ourselves in, is like, there is a bigger purpose than just ourselves, and our fear is, yes, holding us back, but it's also holding back the potential of others.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And if we have been given a gift, whatever that gift might be, whether it's singing or writing or speaking or, just simply visiting with people one-on-one, And we have a fear about doing that because we don't think we're good enough. We don't think we're qualified. We don't, whatever it is, and we don't do it. That's selfishness. It is.
How has moving from a life of fear to a life of courage, a life of settling, a life of really finding your identity, how has that changed the impact you have in the lives of others? You mentioned selfishness. When you're not walking in that, you're actually being selfish. But how has that changed your impact?
It really pushes me to make sure that I get out there. And the fascinating thing about speaking about fear and courage is it plays itself out in my life every day. Every time I go to speak, the old default voice in my head says, these people don't want to hear what you have to say. Why would they want to hear what you have to say? And this is another thing too, I think, Michael, that is so important in moving from fear to courage is recognizing the default voice in your head. So often we stay in the default. And so as I think about what has helped me move from fear to courage and how I've changed, I recognize that voice as soon as it's there. And the first thing I do is I begin to pray, Lord, take this thought away, help me to keep moving forward. And so I think that's the critical thing is recognizing the default voice that we all have and saying, I'm not going there today. I'm going the other direction.
One of the things with fear is a lot of our fears, one, are self-inflicted. You talk about the you can't versus you can voice, but sometimes those voices are then reinforced by others, whether it was when you were a kid and you had a dream and it was a teacher who told you were being silly, or whether it was for a lot of people, they didn't excel in a specific area, but they had passion for it. And instead of pushing into it further, they listened to somebody that said, oh, you should just give up. How do we deal with the voice that's external, that's influencing and feeding those fears? How do we overcome those obstacles of maybe others who, whether it's because they're filled with fear, maybe it's because they're jealous of the strides you're making, or maybe it's because you're hanging out with the wrong people. But how can you overcome that external voice that's reinforcing the you can't voice?
Yeah, and there's a couple things I think that are key to that, Michael. First of all, it's recognizing the voice. I printed out an email that I received just the other day from a presentation I gave last week. And it's just a short paragraph here. And the gentleman says, even as a 64-year-old nonprofit executive, I am still so afraid of disappointing my dad, who died in 1977.
Wow.
One of the last conversations we had in 1976 concerned my career trajectory as a public school band director. When are you going to get a real job was his question of me my first year out of college.
Wow.
I have tried all my life to be that amazingly successful businessman that was my dad, but really all I've ever wanted to do is have young people make great music. So it's recognizing the voice and recognizing the message that you get, and you have to deal with the message. And again, I'll go back to my counseling. That's what I did with my counselor, was I dealt with the messages that I got, and I had to change the message, to change the belief about myself, to change how I saw my ability and my capability as a speaker. So I think that's the first thing. Again, we have the default, and are we willing to deal with the default on that? And because those voices are so powerful, they've come from so many directions. And there are people that have great messages as well, but often it's those negative messages that keep us from doing it.
I love about your story that you made this transition in midlife. And I think so many people, they get stuck in their situation and they think it's too late for them. Can you speak to that maybe a little bit, and how, from your experience, it's never too late, or how they can make that movement and overcome the fear of age impacting their call and their destiny?
Yeah, again, Michael, you talk so much about people's passion, and it doesn't matter how old you get. If you have a passion for something and you have a gifting for something, I don't think that's going away.
Yeah.
And so what you might do because you're older might look different than what you thought you might want to do with it when you were 25. It might be, dramatically different, but begin to explore it anyway, because if you're gifted in it and you're passionate in it, that's never going to change. And it's better to step into it, maybe not have it work out, than to live with the regret of not doing anything about it till you die.
Yeah.
And so again, it's just a matter of step into it. And I don't know that there's any silver bullet or magic bullet. You just have to start to explore it.
One of the other things I encounter a lot when I talk to people is that step between fear and courage, when they're stepping into the courage avenue, when they're stepping into moving forward, and they hit the roadblock of not knowing what the next step is. They go, I'm ready to move past this. I'm putting fear behind me, but they just don't know what the next step is past that fear. Maybe it's that they want to become a speaker like you did, and they just don't know what it takes to do the next step. What are some resources people can use to really, once they've made that decision to transition from fear to courage, they can continue that journey and not get discouraged early on?
I think, first of all, recognize that you're going to hit the wall at some point. I'm a big fan of Dr. Brene Brown, who refers to that as the messy middle.
Okay.
And it's the willingness to stay in that messy middle and not turn back and walk away from it. I reference a boulder when I speak of standing in front of this boulder and pushing it and pushing it and pushing it and not getting it to go anywhere. So a couple other things I think is, do you have, as you go on this journey, as you begin to step into your fear, do you have community that you work with, people that will support you, that will encourage you and push you through? Sometimes we need people with their hands in the small of our back. I can remember as I was starting this process, I would pray for the Holy Spirit for glimmers of hope.
Okay.
Just little small things that would keep me moving forward.
Yeah.
When I didn't want to. So finding community, finding people who can encourage you, lift you up, hold your hand, and even push you as you go is such a critical piece of the success. And I think that was one of the 10 steps you had as well.
Yeah.
Of the community of people who can encourage you and get you to a place, get you to that next step and push you through that messy middle is so critical.
You talk about looking for those moments of hope in your journey. You talked just there about, looking for the small things that are saying this is worth it. In your journey, there had to be a moment in which you were pushing through, just doubting yourself and going, okay, I'm still feeling this fear. I'm not arriving to where I want to be. I haven't gotten to the level that I desire to be. Can you tell us a story about one of those small little glimmers of hope throughout the process that was a turning point for you and your process of this pivot in your life?
I have been blessed in this journey to get connected with a gentleman named David Horsager.
Okay.
He is his company business is called the Trust Edge Leadership Institute. David speaks all over the world. He has a book called The Trust Edge, and it's about the impact of trust on the bottom line. And I have been fortunate to get connected with him. He was such an encouragement to me. This is a guy that he is at the pinnacle of success in the speaking, author, training world. And I got connected with him, and to have him tell me, Dave, you're really good at this.
Wow.
Was a huge thing.
Yeah.
Bob Stromberg, who's been a guest on your show.
Yeah. Love Bob.
Who's again, a guy that I just look up to. And Bob came and heard me speak one time, and he said, wow, Dave, your message is really powerful. So to have people who have been successful in doing what I do, and not just moderately successful, but highly successful, those are things that have been a great encouragement to me. Another thing more on a more simple scale is simple things like the email that I just read you a little bit ago.
Yeah.
Where somebody who is struggling, and I had a chance to speak to them. I didn't speak with them in person, but they sent me this email and they said, "You made a difference for me."
Yeah.
Those things are maybe even bigger than the David Horsagers or the Bob Strombergs, because they're coming from the people who are struggling and challenged and looking for a way to have a little bit more courage. So just those kinds of things where people acknowledge what you're telling them has value for them is powerful, has been powerful for me in my journey.
You mentioned Bob Stromberg, who introduced us, and I'm very grateful that he did.
Yep.
You were on his podcast recently, and he titled it The Craft of Courage, which I think is just an incredible, incredible thought. Can you craft a life of courage? Can you create a lifestyle of this that becomes a benchmark of who you are in pushing into your identity and destiny? Or is it just, I guess what I'm trying to ask is can you master this craft and create a lifestyle, or is it always difficult at every stage?
I don't know that you can master the craft of courage, but I do definitely think you can get better at it. I think that courage is like a muscle, and that's not mine. I read that somewhere, that the more often we act courageous, the easier it is to be courageous the next time. I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's easier. And it's fascinating as I do coaching with people, as I work with David Horsager and some of the people that he works with, the opportunity to be courageous is all around us. Maybe it's you're the lone voice in the meeting of dissent.
Okay.
As you're sitting in a meeting with all of your peers, maybe it's standing up to your boss and saying, "I don't think that's the right thing to do." It's maybe holding your kids accountable rather than wanting to be your kid's best friend. So opportunities to be courageous are around us every single day. And again, it's having recognition and awareness of that. Just like we talked before about having an awareness of the voice, it's about having an awareness of the opportunity to be courageous. Right now, one of the things that's big in the news, Michael, as you know, is the Harvey Weinstein situation.
Yeah.
And it's been going on for decades, apparently. And now, all of a sudden, everybody is coming out. Where was the courageous voice 20 years ago?
Right.
That may have stopped that. And again, when we talk about fear being selfish, people stay in their fear to protect themselves, but then other people pay a price if they're not willing to step forward. So it's I don't think it's ever easy. I think it can become easier. And it's, again, recognizing the opportunities that we have to be courageous every day.
That's really, really good. You're a speaker, a coach, and a trainer. Tell us a little bit about the kind of projects you work on, the people you work with, and the kind of individuals and organizations you help.
Wow, that's a fascinating question. As I got into this speaking on fear and courage, I did a lot of research. Okay, how do I do this? Talked with a lot of different people, and they all said, well, you need to find your niche. And I've really wrestled with that, and I've had several people now tell me, as I've asked other people, I don't know that there is a niche for courage.
Yeah.
It plays itself out. It doesn't matter if it's the frontline worker or the CEO. I've had conversations with people at all ends of the spectrum. So I've spoken with insurance companies, I've spoken with sales organizations, with nonprofits, with CEO networking, large groups of C-level executives, and basketball teams, college basketball teams. So it's just fascinating to see. And again, courage, much like my friend David's topic on trust, courage isn't something that we talk about a lot. And fear isn't something that we talk about a lot. We want to pretend that everything in our lives is hunky-dory, and so we don't share those kinds of things. So the audience has been wide ranging, and it seems to have been well received just about everywhere I've gone.
What is the biggest fear you've overcome?
To begin with, going to counseling to address the issues around my father's death. That was something that I didn't want to do. I was told not to do it. We never talked about it. As you know, the years that we were together as a family before we, moved out of Mom's house, Mom told me that she often tried to get us to talk about it individually. Wow. She said that my response was always, "It's too hard, Mom. I don't want to talk about it." So I think just being willing to face that 40 years after the fact allowed me then to begin to face the other fears that I've experienced around being a speaker, around speaking up, around not settling, but saying, you know what, I can do this.
So one of the things that I learned as I was researching is that you feel that moving from fear to courage can make us actually more productive, more passionate, and have more engaging lives. How can really stepping into courage free us up to be more productive, more passionate, and more engaged in the world around us?
I think I'm going to go back to this gentleman who sent me this email.
Yeah.
And I think, he probably did a pretty good job as an executive. In fact, he currently still is in the role as an executive of a nonprofit. But he's not passionate about that. And when you're not passionate, people recognize that. They may not voice it. They may not even know what it is, but there's a sense that he might just be going through the motions like they're going through the motions. And so I think when you start to live a courageous life and to live in your passion and to live in your calling and to live in your gifts, you send off a whole different vibe about who you are. You, I think, excite people, you encourage people, you accomplish more. And in doing that, you make a difference in the lives of the people around you. They want to know, what is it about this guy that he has that the guy comes in with a smile on his face and he just digs in. What is it about him that causes that? And so you make a difference just because you are in essence sharing who God created you to be.
Now, I heard a rumor that you might be working on a book. Is that true?
It is.
Okay.
And I will say, I know what question 6 is at the end of the podcast. And so for me, finishing the book is one of the dreams that I have. And I have to say, I'm not an author. Why would anybody want to read what I have to write? Again, it's that voice, but recognize that default. But I have been working with a really great editor. Her name is Sue, and she has been so encouraging in this journey that the book, I'm now seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and my voice is now, I'm getting excited about this.
Wow.
This is going to be really cool. And so, yes, Michael, I am writing a book, and it is getting close.
That's really, really cool. I know there's going to be some people listening, and they want to learn more from you. How can they find and connect with you?
My website, Michael, is www.cultivatecourage.com. That's my hope in what I do, is to get people to at least plant a seed in their hearts about being more courageous when they have opportunities. And so it's cultivatecourage.com. My email address, dave@cultivatecourage.com. And my phone number is 952-200-7499. I would welcome people to call me, to send me an email. I have a blog post that I write every week, and so I welcome their comments and subscribing to the email, or to subscribe to the blog as well.
I had written down a question that I wanted to ask, and you actually already answered it. It was, what's one person who's impacted you on your journey? And you talked about, I forget the guy's name, but from the Trust Edge.
Yeah.
And
David Horsager.
Yeah. Can you maybe share, instead of that, since we already hit that, can you share maybe one story of, by taking this step of courage, one moment where you were just doing what you were doing because you stepped into it and you just went, wow, I never dreamed this was possible?
That's an easy answer.
Okay.
And it really happens every time after I speak and I get in my car. I had a lot of success as a young man growing up playing basketball. Played basketball in high school and college and overseas, and it was something that I was passionate about. And after games, there was just this sense of fulfillment and sense of satisfaction of having worked hard, done something that I was passionate about. And I never experienced that again until I started down this road of speaking about courage.
Wow.
When I am done and I get in the car and I start to drive home or wherever it might be that I'm headed next, there is just a sense of fulfillment that is so gratifying, it's just hard to even put into words. I feel so incredibly blessed to do what I do. I'm humbled by the very personal stories that people share with me. And so it's that moment when I get in the car and I start to drive away that that for me answers that question.
In a moment, we'll be right back with our rapid fire questions with Dave Cornell. But first, I wanted to let you know about a really cool program that we're starting called Idea Camps. We're starting our first one this coming year, early 2018, and I want you to be a part of it. We're going to start with virtual idea camps, which makes it easy. No matter where you're at, no matter what your schedule's like, you're going to be able to jump into these virtual idea camps and join the process of becoming a dreamer and chasing that big idea. It's easy to learn more about it. Swing on over to jumblethink.com/ideacamp, and you can sign up for some updates that are going to be coming out on when the course goes live. The best thing about this is if you sign up today, you get to go to the course for free. Yeah, that's right, free. And you get to join our private Facebook group. Both things are things that we typically charge for. So it's going to be a really fun time. I want you to be a part of it. Swing on over to jumblethink.com/ideacamp. Now let's jump back into the conversation with Dave Cornell. Well, let's jump into our rapid fire questions as we move towards the end of this episode. The first question I have for you is, what is one tip you would give someone with a big idea and dream and they simply don't know where to start?
We talked about this already, and I would say to write it down.
Yeah.
Get it on paper, get it out of your head. And there's something about that first step of getting it out that is so, so big. It becomes more real when you read it, and then share it with somebody that you trust, and start to build a community of people that can encourage you, that can help you, and can maybe push you when you don't really want to go.
What's one change you'd like to see in the world?
This is really idealistic.
Okay.
But I would like everyone to begin to see the world through the eyes of other people before looking through their own lens.
Okay.
So much of conflict, so much of the challenge we face in life and with other people is because we only look at it through our lens and our background and our experience. And if we take the time to hear what other people have to say, I think it just opens our eyes to new opportunities and to new people. And so I think just learning to see through someone else's eyes is a change I'd like to see.
What do you want your legacy to be?
Oh, this is a great question, a hard question. And I think, first of all, I want my legacy to be that I love the Lord.
Okay.
And I lived in the gifts that he created for me, or that he gave me, that I loved my family, and that I helped people in their journey along the way to maybe accomplish something that they didn't think that they could.
Who or what inspires you?
I'm a big fan. I can't play a musical instrument. can't play a note, can't sing a note, Michael, but lyrics have huge power for me and are great inspirations for me. There's a Sarah Bareilles song titled Brave, which kind of fits into what I speak about. But one of the songs or one of the lyrics is, I wonder what would happen if you say what you wanted to say and let the words fall out honestly. I want to see you be brave. And there's a part in there she talks about sometimes the shadow wins.
Yeah.
And I think the shadow is fear. And so we need to step out of the shadow. Another example of that is the song It Is Well, which was sung at my mom's funeral by Horatio G. Spafford. And there's a verse in there, and I know you're familiar with it. Whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul.
Yeah.
And that, again, lyrics for me just speak to me so powerfully. So that's one of the things I think that really inspires me, is hearing lyrics, even lines in movies that just strike me.
Yeah.
Bob Stromberg, again, to go back to him, he talks about grabbing. I grab song lyrics and I grab lines from movies.
Mm-hmm.
I find them very inspirational.
What are you currently reading or watching?
I am currently reading Donald Miller's Building a Story Brand.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of Donald Miller and the books that he has written in the past. I'm a big fan of his idea and concept of telling about our business with a story.
Yeah.
So I don't communicate very well, or as well as I would like to, what it is that I do and what I want to do with and for people. So I'm reading Donald Miller's book, Building a Story Brand, and hope to implement that much better in how I tell my own story. Listening, Bob Stromberg's podcast, The Wide-Eyed Creative, is a favorite of mine. I'm a big fan. I'm a big story guy. I love story. So I listen to This American Life and the Moth Radio Hour, both of those on public radio, NPR. I just love hearing people's stories. So those are the things that I'm reading and listening to right now.
Yeah, I love those two. Also, they have great podcasts with those two. So
yeah,
really good stuff there.
Yeah.
Now, you referenced it already, but our final question on every episode is, what is one dream you're still wanting to fulfill in your own life?
Yeah, and I'll say finishing the book is the first one. And again, I'm seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. The second one is I started a master's program in psychology with an emphasis in leadership coaching several years ago. For a variety of reasons, I stopped. And I want to complete that. That is a dream, to complete that. I have a history of being a great starter and a lousy finisher. So those are two that I had great starts on, both of them. Now the book is really starting to come close, and I want to do the very same thing in finishing up that master's program too.
Dave, it has been so much fun having you on the podcast. Thanks for taking time out.
Thanks so much for having me, Michael. I have enjoyed it immensely, and it's been an honor to be with you.
Once again, I want to thank today's guest, Dave Cornell, for taking time out to share his story, his journey, and teaching us so much about fear and courage. You can check him out at cultivatecourage.com. Our guest on Monday's episode is Glenn Livingston. Glenn is a psychologist and a longtime CEO of a multi-million-dollar consulting firm. He's written a book called Never Binge Again, and we get to talk about his own journey with overcoming obesity and food prisons. He's been featured on Chicago Sun-Times, UPN, The Star-Ledger, Daily News, The New York Times, Los Angeles Times, CBS Radio, WGN America. Make sure to swing back on Monday for our episode with Glenn Livingston. We are so excited about our idea camps, and I want to make sure that you get on board. Swing on over to jumblethink.com/ideacamp to learn a little bit more about our virtual idea camps launching in 2018. If you sign up today, you get to go to the course for free and join our private Facebook group. It's going to be a lot of fun. I don't want you to miss it. And really start that journey of chasing your big idea and dream and changing the world around you. So swing on over to jumblethink.com/ideacamp and check out what's going on with our new idea camps in 2018. For you, the listeners of the Jumblethink podcast, FreshBooks is offering a 30-day free trial to give you the opportunity to try out their service. FreshBooks is the easy-to-use invoicing software designed to help freelancers and small business owners get organized, save time invoicing, and get paid faster. One of the best ways to grow your business is stop focusing on invoicing and billing and accounting and start focusing on the things to grow your business. To try FreshBooks for free for 30 days, just go over to www.gofreshbooks.com/jumblethink. That's www.gofreshbooks.com/jumblethink. I want to thank you for tuning into the podcast. I love doing the podcast. I love meeting amazing people. And most importantly, I like helping you on your journey to chasing that big idea and dream. Until Monday, go out there, start taking that first step to chase that big idea and dream and change the world around you.
Les mères de famille, les enfants, peuvent également prendre un moment revitalisant dans quelques mois, lorsque vous aurez bien saisi la technique et que vous serez maître de votre corps. Vous pourrez vous décontracter même en travaillant.